he was answering all my questions. And I take over just.
So this is basically a trip which me, Karthik, and couple of other friends we planned during 18th to 24th of September 2017. And Hanle is a site which is at a very high altitude of around 4,200 meters, and there is an observatory which is owned by Indian Astronomical Observatory, which belongs to Indian Institute of Astrophysics. Hanle is also a place for a village which exists called the Hanle village. So this slide shows the view through, when we were going via the aeroplane. So as you can see, there are a lot of mountains. So we were actually in a place which is quite high and it's a dry desert. So this is a topo map showing the altitude. So those numbers basically show how high it is. And the star is where the observing site was. So that is the observing site. So as you can see to the right, we have the high altitude gamma ray telescope, which belongs to IAA. And there is a guest house, which is again owned by IAA. So this is a place which is frequently visited by astrophotographers. We met a couple of them when we went there. And this was a place, I'll show you more photos of the place where we camped. So that is where we were. And it was at 4275 meters. Okay, so for this trip, we had to do a lot of planning, logistics, observing guides, software, because as Akash said in his previous presentations, uh, without planning, the motivation to observe during night kind of decreases given the outside conditions. And the conditions in Ladakh is very severe, and the cold and the winds are quite harsh. So we had to plan everything. And one of the things we planned was an observing guide, which was around 220 pages. And this was in combination with K-Stars, Cartes, Stellarium, and other softwares which we had as a backup. And we also planned for extra power so that we could get the power from the guest house of the IAA all the way to our observing site to run our laptop, iPad, and other accessories. So this is the cover sheet for the observing guide which we made. So this pic shows a couple of during preparation how things were. So as you can see, there's a lot of packing material because we had to ship our telescope through air cargo, which means that the way they handle it will not always be the best. So this is a kind of an image from during the packing, what you can see. So I'm showing you this because this is how it will be for anyone who wants to ship anything from South India or any other place via air. So we have to do a lot of padding, and this was something we all did. And so this is the final pic of the packed equipment. To the right in the cardboard box, you can see it had all the lower truss assembly. In the left, in the Pelican type case, we had the mirrors, which was securely packed. That is the truss pole system. So our main equipment was this, which was a 16-inch telescope. And this was made for the trip itself. So that is the compressed version of the same telescope. And that is the final, all the equipment kind of packed together. So we had much more equipment. This is something I packed at home. We had almost 4 to 5 times and around 200 kilos ish overall of equipment, which we had to plan for this trip. So this is a photo of the scan. I thought it might be interesting. So whenever we ship something from here in air cargo, there's a requirement of scanning it. So this was all the X-ray scanning which was done. And as you can see, it has highlighted some of the sharp metallic objects in the photo. So that is the tripod which belongs to Karthik. It is for the binoculars. So this is the photo on the way to the Leh site. This is one more photo. So this is where we stayed in Leh. So to go to Hanle, we have to first land in Leh Airport, which is the nearest airport, which is around 3,500 meters. Karthik, do you want to talk a little bit about these?
Sure. So most of the planning, in fact, I would say probably 95% of the planning was done by Sanath. The thing was that there were many more people on the trip. One of whom helped us find accommodation in an army mess in Leh. Uh, the challenge with observing at such high altitudes is that you actually suffer a lot from oxygen deprivation and altitude sickness. So we stayed at Leh for I think a couple of days. I don't remember now. It's been 3 years. Sanath, was it a couple of days or?
Oh, actually, we landed at 11:15 a.m. and we made a mistake, which was we didn't acclimatize because we had planned only a week's trip, and so we left the very next morning around 8:39ish. So it was less than a complete 24 hours, I suppose.
Yeah. So that was one of the things we probably should have done differently. We should have spent more time acclimatization, but that was mostly on that was mostly on a bunch of us who didn't have enough time off from work. But anyway, so Sanath, what would you like me to cover?
I'll just switch slides. You can maybe
Okay.
talk.
Oh yeah, this is at Hanle. So the choice of equipment was basically this. We had Adarsh's 16-inch, which was modified, and we had a pair of binoculars. The idea is that we used both high power as well as binoculars for diffuse wide field objects. So the trip was pretty amazing. The skies in Hanle were superlative. We got to see things there that we had never seen in our lives before. So, I mean, before Hanle, the craziest observation I had made was basically trying to detect M1 in a pair of 10 by 50 binoculars. That was from Sakleshpur. But at Hanle, the kind of things we saw were mind blowing. So you pretty much, I mean, the night we landed at Hanle. We drove there basically. We landed there, I think, by 7 p.m. Or something, well after dark. And the first sight that greeted our eyes was basically the Rho Ophiuchi complex. We saw this with the naked eye. It was brilliant. I'd never seen it before with the naked eye. And and then this is a picture of the observing site. You can see the tents. So Sanath mentioned it was a dry desert. It is so dry that if you happen to brush across the tents in the middle of the night, you actually see sparks. So I'll Sanath, maybe you should talk about some of the objects we saw through the telescope, and then I can talk a little bit about the binocs and maybe a little bit about the setup, and then yeah.
Sure, Karthik. Okay, so as you can see, the to the left of the photo, we have the Hugger telescopes, which belongs to the IIA. And then in the front, in the middle, slightly to the left, the big equipment is the 16-inch truss system, which we use there. And at the back, the tents are basically where we did not live. We lived in homestays nearby, but uh, we set it up so that all the equipment can be there so that it can be reached very easily. And just right in front of the blue tent, you can see a tripod, which is basically a parallelogram mount for the binoculars, which Karthik had purchased. So that was the main setup.
Oh yeah, I should probably mention this. The parallelogram mount is made by Agyei, who's probably on this call. Best binocular purchase I've ever made because it completely changed what I could see and what I couldn't see.
Yeah, it was very comfortable because holding a big binoculars without this and with this, there is a huge difference. So because we had a team of around 5 to 6 people, we wanted to make sure that even binocular observation can be transferred from one person to another. And in a star-rich field like Hanle, it becomes difficult to hand over the binocular to the next person and ask them to locate the same object which you have seen. So this mount was, I think, very
Yeah,
helpful.
Oh, amazing. Because the steadiness that it provides also gives you maybe a couple of orders of magnitude more.
True, 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 true. So this is one more photo. Those to the right of the telescope are the Hugger gamma ray telescopes, and I think this is also a gamma ray. I don't remember the name,
Mace.
but it Mace, right, right, and that was still under construction when we were there. Okay, so that is the close up of the same setup with the parallelogram mount on the left. So this is a photo of on the way from Leh to Hanle. So it took like an entire day for us. So we left morning 8:30 and we reached by almost, I would say, 8:30 in the night. So this is how the scenery looks on the way. So that is the Hanle village in the background, just below the hills. That is where we stayed. And that is again a photo of the Hugger telescope from slightly up in the mountains. Okay, so this is a photo of the IAP 2-meter Chandra telescope, HCT. And this is actually controlled from Kote in Bangalore, near Bangalore. So that is the dish which communicates, and that is a big observatory. Okay, so that was basically our team. Uh, all these people, and I think one person from here is missing. It was Prasanna from IIA,
He
who
was
is
probably
not in
taking the
the.
photograph, I guess.
Yeah, he was probably taking the photo. I could not find the photo with all of us in one photo, so only he is missing. And we had support from IAP and a lot of people who helped us out, because we could not in general find information about everything custom, because I don't think anyone had done visual observing here with a big equipment. So it was a challenge. And that is a photo of the night sky with the telescope. So that shows the red lights which we were using in a long exposure. So Karthik, do you want to talk about the objects or?
You go ahead, Sanath, because these are the ones that you primarily observed. So I'll pitch in.
Sure, sure, sure. Okay, so there are a lot of objects we observed, and so what we did was we had some filters like oxygen 3 and other filters with us, and we took our time to look into each object with different combinations and different magnifications, and do some quality observing. Now, before I get into what all we observed, I think one point which probably even Karthik will talk about, which is important, is whatever the plus and minuses of the site, and because of which our observing was positively or negatively affected. So the plus of the site is that it is one of the best sites available in India. Given the light pollution, there is absolutely one of the lowest, I would say, compared to any other site. And given the high altitude, the views were HD, ultra HD quality. So the contrast of the sky again was really brilliant. But one thing to note is that anything more than 3,500 meters altitude is considered high altitude. Now, 4,500 meters is something where anyone who goes have to acclimatize at Leh for around 2 solid days, 2 to 3 days, because that allows our oxygen in our body for the hemoglobin and other things to be formed, and that takes certain amount of time. So that acclimatization process takes few days, and then we go to the site, and again we are supposed to actually rest for a day. And if we do this, then we get skies with seeing quality which is second to none in India, and but with a reduced oxygen. So if you all remember, Akash spoke about the importance of oxygen for observing. And me and Akash were having a discussion about this, about what is the best altitude. And thankfully, we had oxygen cylinders there with us, which saved us. But most of us had issues with acclimatization. wherein we had headaches, and some of us could not perform all the days. So Karthik can maybe pitch
Oh
in
yeah,
slightly on this
actually,
topic.
yeah. So there's one anecdote that I'd like to relate. So the surprising thing for me at least was okay. So my primary set of objects was going to be binocular galaxies because for whatever it is, I have this affinity towards binoculars, and even from near Bangalore, I've observed a fair amount of binocular galaxies, right? Things like the Leo triplets, Centaur Agyei, or even Barnard's galaxy in Sagittarius, they're not terribly difficult to find, and there's some thrill I get out of looking at them through binocs. So I was looking forward to Ladakh just to use the binocs and get some really tiny galaxies out there. The funny part was, so Adarsh and I did this experiment of sorts. So we looked at Andromeda M31 through the binoculars, and we could not see the dust lanes, right? So that was a little bit of a surprise. So we took a whiff of oxygen from one of the tanks, and you know what? Instantly the dust lane just popped into view.
Yes, yes, yes. I've
And
had
then
this
it did not.
experience
So
as well.
clearly, it was a lack of oxygen that was exactly clearly it was a lack of oxygen that was hampering our ability to observe. And I think with sufficient acclimatization, one can basically see a wealth of detail and a wealth of objects as well. One of the things that Sanath pointed out was that we could see the knots in the arms of M33. We've never seen that from Bangalore or anywhere in South India before. And quite a few extragalactic objects. Okay, but let me not give the plot away. Sanath is going to talk about it shortly. But we could see a wealth of detail, and with proper acclimatization and enough oxygen in our system, I think we could have seen a lot more. But yeah, even then, we saw quite a bit that we had never seen before.
Absolutely. So,
Go
I
ahead,
mean,
Sanath.
the kind of details which I would say we saw, even though we had planned, so we basically had planned to an extent where we knew exactly what equipment each one of us are taking in with about half a kilo of difference. So logistics, dates, and everything got planned 3 months before the trip itself. So this was because if we miss out one single thing, it will be very hard to find it in a remote place like Hanle. So we could not afford to make mistakes in such a place. But I would say the inexperience part which comes into picture here is about certain other things, because we were kind of uh, all right with using our equipments, observing, using softwares, because we have been doing it in South India for a couple of years. But what we were not used to is the cold. So we didn't know how to dress for the cold, and we didn't know what certain of those other factors which I would say we ignored, and we also didn't know how to follow really well. Uh, but even then, with oxygen cylinders and all, we were able to balance out. And here are some of the objects which we saw. I didn't get enough time to put my observing sketches and logs here. So I've just put some of the photos taken from the internet. So this is the ARP 188. Now, this is not exactly how it looks in the telescope, but this shows how the photo is. So the next object is the Faith group of galaxies, which you can see here. These are the galaxies. So this is a UGC 1810 and two other objects which are in the same frame.
By the way, that Hubble Rose, the previous one,
Yeah.
definitely possible with an 18-inch. I remember, I mean, it's not this clear, but I remember that, you know how I said there will be these flashes where you see everything. There was one flash when I saw the entire thing, and the skies were not even that good, and my mirror was not coated back then. So I imagine that you would have, if you had proper oxygen and so on, you should have seen a really good view of this object.
Yes, actually we did have. So all we had to do was we had a cylinder next to us, around 5 liter cylinder, and we would just use the cylinder while we are observing, and so we would take turns. So we actually were on supplemental oxygen throughout the night whenever we were
Amazing.
observing.
And funnily enough, with a 16-inch, it was actually we saw quite a bit of detail. I think the aperture kind of made up for the lack of oxygen there.
Yeah.
So you
So
were literally high on oxygen.
high on oxygen, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think this was one of the best objects which I saw there, because I was able to see every single detail, the minutest detail, I would say, in ultra HD, and it was as if I'm looking at an image, and that was kind of unbelievable, because usually diffused objects we expect it to see in a diffused and not very defined borders of the objects. But this is one object where I really enjoyed, and I mean, I couldn't have finished it even with 10 or 15 hours of observing time with me, and if me plus two other people, I suppose. So Whale Nebula was one of the highlights. Then we saw the Wolf Rayet object. There were a lot of other galaxies. 16th Mag. Uh, uh, I haven't had time to look up my log, which was created, and put it in this. These were some of the objects which Karthik had written in his observation, which I just quickly got into this presentation.
And one of the interesting things there was the binoculars were pretty amazing on large diffuse objects. So just looking at the Pleiades early in the morning, the nebulosity was apparent. You didn't really have to hunt for it. It was right there. And you could actually see the Flame Nebula and the Orion Molecular Cloud Complex with huge amount of contrast in the binocs. I was so taken aback by this. I actually tried hunting for the horse head, but I could not find it. I guess maybe with better oxygen, it was possible. So yeah, the binocs, I forgot to mention, they were 16 by 70 binoculars, and the sheer amount of contrast you got on large diffuse objects was breathtaking. I haven't. The Flame Nebula was really brilliant. Never seen it that way since.
Karthik, you could see the Bernard's loop as well.
Shades of it, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
My God, that's very remarkable.
I know. I mean, I've never seen those kind of skies ever.
Yeah, I think the contrast was the one highlight factor. One con which I forgot to mention is the high winds. Now, for anyone who wants to plan a trip like this, I would say plan for the winds, because I mean, you can't really plan for the winds, but keep it as a factor, because they do shake the scope around. And it wasn't the case on all nights, but I think it was something which did matter at times, especially if I was on high magnification, then it did matter.
Yeah. So one other thing to mention here would be this. Sometimes you get tripped up on the most stupid of things. So acclimatization was a rookie mistake. But one of the other stupid things I did was not wearing the right kind of shoes or socks. Actually, I had socks, but I was wearing regular sneakers. The trouble with wearing regular sneakers in a place like Hanle, the cold just gets through, your toes feel terrible. So we had all kinds of nice jackets and gloves and everything, but I slipped up on the shoes. And that's a kind of stupid mistake you don't want to make when you go to a place like that.
Yeah, true. So one thing though, I had a thank you slide. It got missed out in the last minute. Now, special thanks to the Indian Army for giving us the accommodation in Leh. And then a lot of my mentors, I would say one of the first people who got me into astronomy was Amar Sharma. And he had the vision, and I would say he was one of the few people who knew how to go international level in observing, because most people I met would do Messier but wouldn't go beyond that, and he would. And then of course Akash, and I've known Akash since my college days, and he was one of the first people who came and gave a talk on deep sky observing in our college during my first PO time. So he has been a good mentor since then. A lot of forums like DSF and Indian Institute of Astrophysics for giving us the permission. And I've missed out a lot more people here, but in general, I think even Suresh Mohan for helping me out with a lot of information. I don't know if he's here today, but I'd called him and troubled him with a lot of information. So I would say thank you to all the people who helped us for this trip.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Sanath has thanked everybody. I don't think there's anybody else on the list. But yeah, it's indeed thanks are due to many, many people. This trip wasn't something that 2 or 3 people did. A lot of people's effort went into it.
So I never knew. I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing in complete presentation about this trip, right? Of course, Sanath had told me about it. He had discussed various steps of it, and I knew you all went, and I knew you all had altitude problems and
Yeah.
cold problems and so on. But this is really impressive. I mean, all of this is just making me want to do this again with you folks. I really want to go to Ladakh and observe from there. So I'm.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
I think the best way to do astronomy in South India is to not do it in South India.
But I think Akash, for
yes and no.
I agree. But go ahead, Karthik. Elaborate.
Guys,
Yes and no.
Sorry, there's a question. Leela ma'am has a question. What was the highest magnification that we used at Ladakh? If I remember correctly, the eyepiece, the smallest eyepiece we had was a 10 Delos. Is that right, Sanath?
No, we had smaller. We had, I think, 7, 3, and 4 mm. I'm sorry, I don't exactly remember. It's been quite some time.
Right. That's true. That's true.
One thing
Sorry,
from
you're
my
right.
nature, I would say, is that I would, if I had the eyepiece, which is 4 mm or 7 mm, it's most likely that I would have tried it, because just to see how it works out on an
True.
object.
True.
So I'll check my
Absolutely.
logs and get back about that point,
Yeah.
Leela ma'am.
I mentioned the 10 Delos because that's the smallest one I remembered. But yeah, you're right. I think we had a 7 or a 4 too. I don't remember which eyepieces those were.
And
Oh, wait, I can
Akash's
actually look this up.
K-star was something which I used for making a list within the night of when to observe what. And one last point, sorry, it's not in order, but there was this wonderful iPhone app called Observer Pro, and it had the meridian transit time for all the objects, and I could log objects in them. So it's a free app which I downloaded, and all our equipment had rubylith sheets on them, so we were able to use our phones, laptops. Even the laptop backlight had a rubylith. So
Oh yeah, I remember that.
so these were some of the things which we used overall. I think from my side, that's it.
Oh, there's Kirti. You should probably go ahead and just ask.
Yeah. So
go ahead, Agyei. Or go ahead, Kirti. Whoever, please go ahead.
okay, so Agyei Talwar is in the call, and he has explored a lot of wonderful places for observation and photography in India. So a question to Agyei. So which are the other good places to observe and photograph in India? Agyei, are you there? Okay, I can't hear from him, so I don't know whether he's online or not.
I guess he's on mute.
Or maybe he's away.
Yeah, he could be away from keyboard. I have a few comments on this. Number one, I think there are very important learnings from this, which I hope I also have reiterated in the talk before. Is never underestimate cold, never underestimate weather conditions, and
Good God, yes.
Optimize your astronomy as much as possible. And I think really, Sanath and Karthik and this entire trip group has really optimized their visual observing very well. The rubylith and all of that. But cold and altitude and all of these still ended up being a problem. So it's It takes a lot of effort to plan something like this. And the other thing I want to say is I would love to repeat this again. So let's try and do more of this. And I would love to fly and be a part of this.
Oh,
Sure,
absolutely.
Rakesh, we can do that.
Would be awesome to have you as part of this.
And
Hello,
Agyei, I don't know if you also saw a message from Agyei. Agyei is on the road. Oh, Agyei unmuted himself. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Hi,
Yes.
hi. Yes, we
Yeah.
can hear you.
Hello, everyone. I'm on the road and I'm here to recce visit for the upcoming eclipse in Punjab-Haryana border. And I just heard somebody mentioning my name and asking which are the other good places. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, when anybody asks me this question, I say that Hanle is the best. You shouldn't even think of, but you have been discussing about Hanle, so I should mention a few other places like Leh is very easy. You can just fly down over there, and in the middle of the town, you can see Milky Way. So Leh is one of the beautiful places which is actually very easy. And if you go in October or November, even the airfares are very cheap at that time. Apart from that, um, you can go to the Western Himalayas like Uttarakhand and Himachal.
Mhm.
Himachal gets more rain. Uttarakhand, if you move towards Kumaon, you get less rain. There is, of course, the location of Devsthal, which is the largest telescope in India. And you have an observatory which they facilitate you. So that's a very nice place.
Mhm.
Thanks a ton. That was
Thank
good
you.
to know.
Okay. If you have any other question, I'm listening in.
I guess is it possible to arrange trips to Hanle like this even now? Like, can we form some sort of a group to exchange information about this? That is the a big question I have. I realize it is IIA property and so on and so forth. There are a lot of government permissions involved, but including inner line permit. So I just was wondering if there's somewhere to aggregate all of this information on how to go to these amazing observing places as a group.
The answer to that is IIA people don't like this. They don't want this information too readily available to everyone.
I agree.
Right.
I mean, given that I was a student there when this happened, I kind of
Oh,
agree with.
So,
Agyei.
so the interesting anecdote on related lines, one of the mornings when we were touring the observatory, there's actually a surprising number of tourists that come to Hanle. I don't understand why, because they were there even in our homestay. So the thing was, we saw quite a few visitors to the observatory, and they just looked at the telescope. They wanted to see through it, and they were very disappointed when they were told that A, it was daylight, you couldn't see through it. B, it was meant only for photography, so you couldn't see through it. So I can kind of understand why IIA doesn't want this to be publicized too much.
But if there is a group and some information is required, I'm always there to answer questions and contribute to the group.
Oh, absolutely. And
Thank you.
it
Thank
was
you
a
so
pleasure
much.
to see you at Hanle.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess if there's anything else to discuss, we can discuss. I'm still available. I think this has been seeing Sanath and Karthik's presentation has been exceptional for me. So otherwise, if there's no more discussion, then we can eventually end the call.
Anyone else wants to share their unique experiences? Maybe Shashikiran, Kolar, or somebody else?
I think we have a question. 2 questions.
So, question from Sunil. Akash, what are the next tough objects you are planning to observe in near future?
Uh, Good question. I'm really bad at keeping track of my observing list for all that I have just discussed. So answer is I don't know, but I have a lot of things that I have to sit through and put together that include failed observations, half-complete projects. I think one thing that I would love to resume is local group. I've been checking off a lot of galaxies in our local group. Many of these are extremely faint dwarf galaxies, which are very low surface brightness and need the best skies and best optics. And I have not yet confirmed some of these, including there's a galaxy called WLM, in which there is a stellar association. I think they call it Hodge A1 or something. I would love to make that observation again. There's 2 really faint in the IC342 group, which is a group of galaxies that has been obscured by Milky Way dust and therefore is extremely hard to observe. There are still 2 targets left, which are extremely faint, dust-obscured galaxies. I would love to try see IFN. I have never seen IFN. I would love to be able to see more detail in various diffuse nebulosities. There's always large planetary nebulae that there are an endless list of challenging large planetary nebulae that I haven't finished. I would love to see some arc galaxies in my telescope. I have seen very few of the arc galaxies in my telescope. In Jimmy's telescope, I've seen a lot more, but I would love to see what I can see of, for example, ARC 148 and ARC 147 in my own telescope. There's a lot of things floating around, but I don't have a plan for what I will do next. I generally will plan a night before or 2 nights before the observing session. I hope that answers the question.
Awesome. There is one more question by Shyam Sundar. Shyam, I could not really understand your question, so can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, hi there.
Yes.
East and southern coast, and nearly about 50 kilometers far away distance, I see that the light pollution level is very much low over there. So basically my question is, what is the best Broughton scale magnitude by which we can have clear visions or clear observations?
I let other people chip in on this because it's been a while since I observed it from light polluted skies. Nowadays, they have a tendency not to observe if it's not very good. But I would say, from my memory, bottle 4 to bottle 5 is where you can see all the Messier objects. So I would say if you have access to bottle 5, that is actually pretty good. But even if you don't, even from your rooftop, you can do a lot of things. Even from the light pollution of major cities, bottle 7, bottle 8, you can still do a lot of good observation. So in terms of, I would say it's so much difficult to go out to these dark sites and observe. So at least in your beginning days, I think it makes a lot of sense to observe from city skies because they train you for really challenging stuff. Just finding any object in the city sky is extremely challenging. But bottle 4 to 5 is where I think it is.
Absolutely. If I might just add to that, Akash.
Yeah.
So it is eminently possible to observe from the city. In fact, Adarsha actually observes with a 16-inch from Marathalli, which is probably one of the most light polluted parts of Bangalore. And he's made quite a few amazing observations from there. Just wanted to call that out. And apart from that, the only thing I have to add to what you said is when you get used to observing from your rooftop, sometimes when you go under a dark sky and you see lots and lots of stars, it's very easy to lose your way. So you have to kind of go prepared for that. But yes, your advice is spot on. You can see a fair bit from your rooftop.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I was trying to make an observatory because I think it is a very close by place to me. And each and every time taking out the scope and doing all the arrangement, it becomes really cumbersome.
Yes.
So that is what my basic intention was regarding asking this question. Although it is good to observe from the rooftop, but we can see that there are so many troubles that we face.
I mean, if you're building an observatory, the solution is try to find the best site that you can have access to, right? So the
Yeah,
darkest bottle that you have, the lowest humidity you can have, the best weather conditions, climate conditions that you can have,
I
the highest elevation that you can have. In South India, elevation is hard to come by unless you are in the.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I'm nearby to the Ghat, and there is a at least 50 kilometers radius zone is there where there is no light pollution at all. I have checked on into the light pollution map also
I
with
see.
the latest info and all, and that is what my main concern was, like whether I should make an observatory there or that.
So maybe we
I
can
think
have this
yeah. Sorry.
discussion
Go ahead.
in the group because let's just keep the questions and answers here, but the discussions can happen on the group.
Sure.
Okay, that's fine by me. We can take it to the group.
Sanath, there's a question for you about the app that you used.
Okay, just 1 second, Karthik. I'll check it out. Um, Observer Pro, yes, it's called Observer Pro. That's right. That's correct. So we used couple of apps. Observer Pro was a mobile handheld, iPhone app, which I used. We had other apps running on laptop as well.
All right. So if there are no more questions, then probably we can end the session. It's already been 2 hours. For all of you who are in on the call, next session will be by Ajay Talwar on the upcoming solar eclipse. So Ajay Talwar actually graciously he asked us because he has been conducting this session multiple times, and he asked whether we would be interested in this, and definitely we all are. And thanks a lot to Ajay for coming forward to do this presentation for BAS. And we will have this session. Ajay Talwar, as you all probably know, he is one of the best astrophotographers in India. His planning of the sessions is really, really wonderful. It's something, and I have been privileged to have attended some of his talks, and they're really, really wonderful. So please do attend next week. Um, it will be really wonderful. Vishwa, do you want to add anything?
Thanks, Kirti. Akash, it has been a wonderful session. I hope people in BAS and the participants have thoroughly enjoyed. Yeah, well, once after this session, I would share a feedback form with all of you guys. You guys let us know what you think on these sessions. Be proactive in your feedback, and it will definitely help us deliver more content in the future. Thank you all. Thanks, Akash.
Thank you for organizing this. And anyone who is observing, that wants to share observing reports or logs or ask for any advice, feel free to write an email to BAS group. And if I don't respond, feel free to send me. If you want my opinions and so on, please feel free to send me a personal email.